Hi there and welcome back. This is Gina from McGuire and I really appreciate that you stopped by. Now today I have a really fun technique for you that I call the sparkled glass technique. The best thing about this is it works with any outline stamp. And if you're someone like me who doesn't like to spend a lot of time coloring or struggles with it, this is a great technique for you. But if you like to color, I think you'll still like it. This involves creating kind of a stained glass look by coloring on the back of acetate and then putting something sparkly behind it. Really cool in real life, and I'm giving you a few different examples so that hopefully you can try it with what you have. All right, let's get started with our first card. On this, I'm using the new Gina K Designs Beautiful Butterflies 2 stamp set. Now, I use butterflies a lot. It's something that I like to use on my cards. This set is unique because the butterflies have fun patterns in them, which are great for adding color. But before we start stamping the butterflies, I want to create that frame that will go around the outside edge. By starting with the frame, it helps me plan where to put my butterflies. Now this is a 5x7 card, so I'm creating some white frames where the outside edge is a little bit less than 5x7, and I'm using a Pink and Main A7 rectangle die that's even smaller than that to cut from the center. So I think the overall outside edge of this is about 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, and then this rectangle that I'm cutting from the center is a bit smaller than that. And I ended up creating 4 white frames like that. Now that I have the frames done, it's time to arrange our stamps. I have a piece of Judikins Embossable window sheets. Any kind of acetate that will withhold any heat applied to it will work for this technique, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. I have the white frame that I'm going to add to my card, and I'm putting it behind the acetate in my MISTI stamping tool. That way I can use that white frame as a guide to arrange all my butterflies inside of it. So here I'm placing the butterflies right on top of the acetate. You can also see that I have the word hello there, which I plan to add later. So I'm just laying the die there just to kind of hold a spot. I'm arranging all the butterflies over that frame. And once I'm happy with the placement of them all, I will close the door on my MISTI stamping tool, which will grab all of the stamps, and then we can start stamping. I will then gently but very generously apply anti-static powder over the acetate. This is really important because we don't want the powder to stick in areas besides the stamping. Now I will ink up my stamp very generously with VersaMark Ink. I then will stamp it onto the acetate. It'll be really hard to see it, but when you tilt it in light, you'll be able to see your images there. I like to stamp it and then check to make sure that the image is stamped completely before moving on. If they didn't stamp completely, I'll ink up my stamps again and stamp it again in the same spot. But I had no problem with it this time. Now I'm adding Hero Art's white embossing powder. You could use whatever color of embossing powder you want here. You could do silver, gold, sparkle, anything. But what I like to do is apply the powder and then tap it pretty generously, like flick it with my fingernail, and then add heat to it. Now, as you can see, I kind of move my heat gun away from it every once in a while because we don't want to warp the acetate. I am using the Judikins Embossable window plastic, which is really friendly for doing heat embossing. It withstands the heat, but you still want to be careful. And again, I still will talk about the other acetates later on. Okay, now for the fun part. We're going to add color to our images, but I'm not coloring on the front of our acetate. This is on the back. So the embossed image is on the other side. This way I don't have to stay inside of the lines. Also, I don't want my embossing powder to harm the tip of my Copic markers. So I'm using Copic markers, which are a permanent marker that works great for this. You could also use colored Sharpies if you have that. If you have alcohol inks, you could use those with a brush and paint them in. But as far as other markers, they aren't going to work well for this. You really want to use any alcohol-based markers or alcohol ink or Sharpies for this. I do recommend using very vibrant colors. The more vibrant it is, or the darker it is, the more it will show up. It tends to go on the acetate a little bit lighter than it does on paper. So I use a lot of my dark jewel tones for this, but you can try whatever colors you have. Now notice it's not a smooth coloring, but that's okay. For this technique, it doesn't need to be. So you can see how quickly I'm applying color to the back of this image. The best part is if you mess up, you can either use your colorless blender or an alcohol swab or rubbing alcohol to just wipe away the color you've done, and you can start again. And notice you can see through this because it's clear acetate, but it's tinted the color that we added on the back. Now I will continue to color all the butterflies in and leave the space around them and between them empty so that our fun background will show through in a bit. So here you can see what it looks like on white cardstock. It's kind of hard to see in the video, but in real life it really stands out nicely. If you want it to stand out more, you could use something besides white embossing powder. Here it is over a light blue cardstock. Stands out even better. However, I find this technique is amazing when you put it over a sparkly specialty cardstock, like glitter paper. This is just silver glitter paper. And you can see that the color that we did looks like glitter. Nothing's going to rub off. It's protected behind the acetate. Here it is over a light blue glitter paper. So you can try any of your holographic cardstocks, any of your glitter papers, shimmer papers, foil papers, anything. This is a Pink and Main holographic cardstock set. Look how cool it looks over this particular one. In the areas of color, like in that bottom butterfly there in the blue, you can see the sparkle coming through. It looks even more impactful when you have larger images colored in. This is just holographic cardstock, and that looks great too. I have many more examples of this that I'll show you as we go, but let's finish up this card. You can see I put some fun kind of textured holographic cardstock behind it, which really makes it stand out. So now I have one of the white die cut frames that I made before from Rectangle Dies. Around the back outside edge, I'm putting some double-sided tape. You could use liquid adhesive here, but I like to use double-sided tape when I'm adhering to acetate. So I'm removing the release paper, and then I will place this right on the front of our white heat embossed images here. So the embossing is facing up towards the camera. The coloring is on the back side. Then I can just trim away the excess. Now, one of the things that I like to do with this technique is add some dimension behind it, behind that white frame, so that the butterflies kind of stand up or stand lifted off of our holographic cardstock background. It just creates a little shadow and it makes the effect even better, but you can skip it if you prefer. So I am just gluing to the back of this piece 3 additional white rectangle die cut frames. That way there'll be dimension behind the acetate. I then use 2 rectangle dies to create a thin blue frame that I'll glue right on the top inside edge of the white frame. This just gives it a little more definition. Little things like this can make a big difference on a card, especially when it's large like this one, a 5x7 card. And then we can add our specialty cardstock right on the back of that frame, and then add it to a 5x7 folded white note card that I created on my own. The only thing I added to this card was a sentiment. The word hello is from an older Gina K Designs kit. I really like the style of it. I cut the shadow from white cardstock and the word hello from black cardstock and glued that right onto the window. The sentiment is white heat embossed on a black cardstock strip, and I'll show you what that's from in a moment. Notice that specialty cardstock showing through the coloring. See the blue on the large butterfly wings there on the bottom? You can see the sparkle through it. It looks super cool in real life. Now, of course, it'll look more impactful when there's larger areas colored, which I'll show you in a moment. But I thought I'd start with this one because it was so much fun and very easy to do. Okay, now that sentiment that said, "I am so grateful," is from this Gina K Designs Time to Coast card kit. This is her newest kit. It has 2 large 6x8 stamp sets, a 4x6 stamp set, all of which I'll be using today in this video. The sentiment I just used is from the 4x6 set. There's cardstock in there. There are coordinating dies and some word dies. I didn't use the coordinating dies or word dies today, but I really like them, and you'll see me use them in the future. I like her kits because there's so much in it, 3 large stamp sets, which is just a fantastic deal. So here's a look at the sentiment stamp set that's in this kit that I used on that last card. I like how you can kind of stack sentiments or just use the small ones or the large ones alone. I like all the different options and that there are some unique sentiments in it also. I will be using more from that kit throughout this video. Okay, here's our next example where I use some large detail outline images with this sparkled glass technique. For this card, I used the new Gina K Designs Caring Flower stamp set. Now there's that large, beautiful image that fills a card very nicely, but what really is outstanding about this set are the very caring sentiments in it. Like, I think about you every day, I care so much about you, you are loved so very much, You have such a caring heart. And then 2 of these would look great inside of a die-cut circle or heart also. So from this, I'll be using the flower, and later I'll use one of the sentiments. So off screen, I white heat embossed the large floral image on heat-resistant acetate with white embossing powder. Now on the back side, I'm once again coloring it with Copic markers. You can notice I am not taking any effort to blend very well or color it very well. Even if you see the lines of the coloring, it doesn't matter one bit. This is all about putting a quick, large amount of color down. Now I use Judikins Embossable window plastic. That means that you can heat emboss it and add heat to it without it buckling much or without any kind of warping. You can test any of the different acetates you may have. Some of the acetate that I get from recycled plastic works well for this. You just need to test it out. If you keep your heat gun moving, sometimes you can use just about any acetate for this. But I have found that the Judikins Embossable window plastic is very reliable. It always works, so I have a pack of that I reach for when I want to try this technique. Another thing is some acetates, no matter how much anti-static powder tool you use, will have so much static on it that it holds the embossing powder all over the surface. So you want to test that also. This embossable window plastic that I'm using doesn't have that problem. The embossing powder comes right off if you use the anti-static powder tool. So you'll want to test that and if the plastic kind of warps when you heat it. But again, there are many different options for this, so I encourage you to give it a try. So I created a frame once again using rectangle dies. This time I used some Gina Masters Layouts dies, which I'll show you later on. So I have white rectangle frames, and I cut 4 of those. One I glued on the front of our heat embossed acetate, and the color is on the back. Now I'm adding the other 3 white rectangle frames to the back of the acetate. This will give it some dimension behind it so that the heat embossing and the color we added is raised. That acetate piece is raised off of the glitter paper we're going to put in the back. That shadow that it creates from being raised is really cool, but you could skip that dimension if you want. I usually use double-sided tape whenever I'm adhering to the acetate. But when I'm just adhering paper to paper, I just use Gina Connect liquid adhesive. I will link to those options below so you can see which of those adhesive options are my favorite. I also wanted to mention again that in this video, I'm using Copic markers for the coloring on the back of the acetate, but you can also use Sharpie markers, other permanent pens or markers, or you can paint with alcohol ink. Okay, now I'm gluing this frame on top of some silver glitter cardstock. That silver glitter shines through the color that we added beautifully. For a sentiment on this card, I'm using one of the 6x8 stamp sets in the Time to Coast card kit from Gina Designs that I showed you earlier. Now this set has some beautiful flowers where you can build the image by stamping the leaves, the stem, the petals, and the inside of the flowers separately in whatever colors you want. But really what struck me about this stamp set are the sentiments. I think they're beautiful, and I'll be using the thank you so much on this card and one of the other sentiments later on in this video. I white heat embossed thank you so much on black cardstock, and I'm cutting it into a wide strip. I wanted to give it a banner end on one side, like a little V cut. Here's a little trick for you. Any rectangle or square die can be used for this. Use the corner of it to put right down the center edge of your little banner. See how I'm taping it there? Run it through your die cut machine and you get a little V cut on your banner strip. A great way to give it a finished edge. Now I could put this anywhere on here. Some people prefer to put their sentiments kind of off to the bottom or side where it doesn't cover anything. However, I like to put it on top of my image so it's a focal point. Your eye is drawn there. But before I glue that down, I decided to stamp the note card this will go on. I'm using an older Gina background stamp. I have a sticky mat in my MISTI stamping tool to hold the note card straight inside of it while I stamp on there with a light gray ink. I just thought it'd be fun to add some interest on the note card. Now we can glue our little sparkled glass technique right to the center, and then we have the thank you so much banner strip that we can add on top of that. Again, you can put it lower if you prefer. I feel like this card has enough interest with the sparkled glass technique that I didn't need to add anything else to it. I didn't add any embellishments. If you look closely and look through the colored portions, you can see how that sparkle really shines through, and it looks like the glitter behind it is sparkly also. If you wanted to step this up, you could put some little sequins or gems on the inside and make this a shaker card also. But I wanted to keep the focus on the floral image, the sentiment, and the sparkly technique. Okay, let's move on to some more examples. This time I colored all of the acetate, so the entire scene. And I did so on a second example too. Both of these cards feature images from one of the large stamp sets in the Time to Coast card kit I showed you before. Here is that 6x8 set. It has many beautiful images. You can see the lighthouse at the top and then the two scenes on the bottom. I ended up white heat embossing on the window plastic all three of those main images, but I only made 2 cards to share. Now here is the one that I didn't use. I white heat embossed it onto the front of some acetate, and now I'm adding some blue behind it. Notice how you can just do scribbles and it turns into a great water look. I put down some medium blue Copic marker, then a darker blue, and then went back to the medium to kind of blend it out. Now it's not a smooth blending like you would get on cardstock, but it creates a cool wave effect that works really well for this particular technique. Now here's another image from that same set. I wanted to show you how easy it is to do a sky. You just do little loops of coloring and it makes a cloudy sky that's just beautiful. Very fast and easy to create. You can go for a smoother look if you want. Now this part of the image I think is supposed to be clouds back there, but I wanted more color, so I decided to make it look like trees in the background of this little island. And remember what I mentioned before, if you aren't happy with the coloring that you're putting on the back of this acetate, you can use an alcohol wipe or rubbing alcohol to remove the color and start over. I'm a big fan of any technique that allows you to start over, especially when it comes to coloring. Okay, let's finish this one into a card. For this, I die cut 4 circle frames. You can see I have 2 circle dies taped together up there on the top right. I cut it 4 times from white cardstock. I'm putting liquid adhesive around the back of this one and then laying it onto our acetate. So this is the front part where the white heat embossing is. It's just laying on the silver sparkle paper there, not glued. While I put something heavy on that while it dries, I will glue the other 3 circle frames together using liquid adhesive. And then those will get glued to the back of our acetate. But first I need to trim off the extra acetate now that this is dry. So I just take my scissors right along the outside edge of the circle frame. Here's the 3 stacked circle frames, and I'll put glue around that and then glue it right onto the back of our acetate. That way there's dimension behind the acetate so it's raised up from the sparkle paper. Now I'm gluing this onto some Tim Holtz silver sparkle cardstock. This is meant for alcohol inks, but it's a beautiful subtle glitter that doesn't rub off, and it looks great behind this acetate that we've colored. So if you're looking for something that's not as sparkly as a glitter paper, that's a great option. Now I glued that onto white cardstock and then onto a silver note card, and I wanted a sentiment that was arched right along the bottom of the circle. What I do is I put the sentiment right along the bottom of the circle. Then I keep changing it in my MISTI stamping tool till I get the arch just right. See how I close it and I see if it matches the arch of the circle, and I keep moving it until it matches. This is a great way to get a new look out of your stamps, and it really is nice for when you want it to just kind of bend along a curve like this circle. Now, if you do not have a stamping tool, you can also put the stamp onto an acrylic block and bend it there and then stamp it onto your card. By the way, all of this is on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding note card that I made from Gina K's silver metallic cardstock. Here's a closer look at the sparkled glass technique that we're doing. Now remember that the glitter cardstock we put behind there isn't as sparkly as normal glitter cardstock. So if you want something a little more subtle, this is a great option, the Tim Holtz Sparkle Alcohol Ink cardstock. But look how beautiful that is with the color on top. And the coloring took very little time. Again, if you don't have acetate, you can use vellum for this technique, but you won't see the sparkle through it nearly as much. So I recommend trying this with acetate. Let's do another using an image from the same stamp set. I think this is my favorite of the bunch because it's very simple and clean cut. Now for this, I used some dies from Gina K Master Layouts die sets. Now she has, I think, 4 or 5 different Master Layouts die sets now, and this is a mix of different dies from them. I actually keep them on magnetic sheets that I've attached inside my cabinet doors, so they're kind of mixed up here, but here's a look at a few of the different Master Layout die sets. I encourage you to take a closer look at them. These are great basic dies that allow you to create basic elements on your card. I used a faux stitch rectangle die and an oval die from these die sets for my next card. But again, check these out because they're really fun to use and I've used them many times in videos. So here I have a faux stitch rectangle die and an oval die. I'm leaving room towards the bottom center so I can add my sentiment later on. Now I originally thought I'd use blue cardstock but ended up switching to white. But here you can see the frame that I created. Now on the back of the frame, I'm putting double-sided tape around the oval opening. I will then lay this onto our acetate piece. This has white heat embossing on the front and then Copic coloring on the back, just as you've seen me do many times in this video. I then glued 3 additional frames to the back so that the window portion would be raised. And then I added a piece of white glitter cardstock behind it. This is Tonic Sugar Crystal Glitter Cardstock. White glitter cardstock works great for this technique. I matted our white rectangle with a light blue cardstock and then added it to a bright blue note card. This is Blue Raspberry cardstock from Gina K Designs. When I use a bright cardstock like this, I like to add white to the inside. I feel like it gives it a finished look and gives a nice place to write our personal message. I stamped with love and care from the Gina K Caring Flowers stamp set that I showed you earlier. Here's a closer look at the Copic coloring that we did on the back of the acetate, the white embossing on the front, and the glitter cardstock behind it. Look how that shines. This sparkled glass technique is beautiful in person. I wish it captured it in video, but you'll have to trust me or give it a try yourself. It's really an easy and fun technique that works great with any outline stamps. I have one more card example for you before we go. I wanted to show you a simple image works great for this technique. This is the Gina K Mayflower stamp set. It's 6x8, has that beautiful large floral image on the top, but I thought I'd use this simple Lily of the Valley there on the bottom right. I white heat embossed the image on the front of the Judikins Embossable window plastic, and now on the back I'm applying dark colors of Copic markers. Now I want these little Lily of the Valley flowers to look kind of a white or an ivory, so I'll put a little bit of yellow marker on them, but not much. To make them look a little more white, I will color blue ink around it, so the sky looks kind of blue around it. For sky, once again, you can go back and forth, or you can kind of do little loops like this to create a cloud effect. Don't worry if it doesn't look great when you put it over white cardstock. If you put it over a sparkly cardstock, it'll look great. Now you could build layers of frames behind this, but I'm putting foam tape. A lot of people ask why I rarely use foam tape. I find it doesn't hold up well over time, and also sometimes it yellows and warps over time. So I like to build up cardstock instead, as you've seen me do in this video. But on this example, I decided to build up layers of foam tape. If you're going to do foam tape, I encourage you to cover the entire back of it so there aren't any areas that'll get smushed while in the mail. Now this white frame is about 6 inches tall by 3 inches wide, and I'm gluing it onto a piece of glitter white cardstock as I did on my last example. So I'm just gluing that right behind the window. I will then add this onto a note card that is 6 1/4 by 3 1/4, which is a good mini slimline note card size. And I'll use a mini slimline envelope for that, which I'll link to below. Now that sentiment underneath is from one of the stamp sets included in the Time to Coast card set. It's such a beautiful sentiment. Here, when you take a closer look, you can see that sparkle cardstock showing through the coloring that we did on the acetate. It really is beautiful in real life, and I encourage you to try it out. Now, in all of my examples today, I did do white heat embossing for my stamping, but you could do silver, you could do black, you could do gold, anything you want. I just like the clean look of the white. Well, there you have it. Several examples of this sparkled glass technique. I hope you'll try it. It's such a fun way to get new looks out of your outline images and a great way to do quick coloring. If you're interested in the supplies I use, I always link them below in my YouTube description. But please go over to my blog where you can bookmark different cards so that you can refer to them later. Also, if you want some similar techniques, I have a couple other videos linked here in the middle. I always appreciate the time that you spend with me. I know my videos are long. I hope you learned a trick or two, and I hope you'll return again soon.